Prior to the 1990s, personal communication was pretty much still limited to phone calls and letters. In those days, long-distance calls were expensive, and you had to plan your call in advance to avoid high fees. People would often write letters to friends and family as a way to keep in touch, and it could take weeks or even months for a response. If you needed to find out information or learn something new, the only place to go was a library, a bookstore, or your outdated set of encyclopedias. There was no Google, no Wikipedia, and no instant access to information. You had to physically go somewhere, look through books, and hope they had the information you needed. Researching before the internet was a time-consuming task, as books were organized by subject and author, and you had to flip through pages upon pages to find what you needed. Records, 8-track tapes, cassettes, and finally CDs were how we built our music collections. Going to the record store was half the fun. Then buying an album and listening to it on a stereo or tape deck was the only way to control what music we listened to. The radio made for some long waits to hear the song you wanted, so it was much faster to just fast forward through a tape to find it. TV, movies, and video games were not instantly at our fingertips either. There were no streaming services, no online gaming, and certainly no YouTube. You had to rent a movie on VHS, or watch it on TV when it aired, commercials and all. You also had to physically go to an arcade to play video games, if you didn't have an expensive home gaming system. The selection of movies and TV was way more limited, and you had to rely on a programming schedule or a certain night of the week to watch your favorite show. If for some reason you had to miss it, taping it using a VCR was the only way to watch it later. Remember when you had to shop at a brick-and-mortar store? There was no Amazon, no online shopping, no home delivery, with the exception of pizza. You had to go to a store, physically look at a product, and pick it up off the shelf. If a store didn't have what you were looking for, you could go to another store, or wait until it was restocked. Shopping was a time-consuming task, which required the consumer to manually compare prices and products. Before the internet, making travel plans was much different. You had to rely on physical maps and printed travel guides to plan your trip. You couldn't just type in your destination and get directions. You had to physically mark your route and plan for stops along the way. Booking a trip was also a hassle, as you had to call travel agencies to make arrangements. And if you wanted to know what a location was like, you had to rely on pictures in travel brochures or word of mouth from friends and family. The idea of a game night prior to the internet meant board games, cards, and tabletop games for entertainment. These games required face-to-face interaction to play, and sometimes it encouraged communication and teamwork, as players would strategize and work together to win. There was no online games, so players had to actually be in the same room to play. This often led to fun and memorable moments that brought people closer together. Watching movies, especially new releases, meant heading to the movie theater. The cinema experience was so special, with the sound and picture quality being the best you could get, and the smell of movie theater popcorn made these trips a blast for sure. It was magical to sit together in a dark room and be transported to another world, if only for a couple of hours. Cooking before the internet often meant relying on handwritten recipes, cookbooks, and word of mouth to make new dishes. People had to experiment with ingredients and rely on their own intuition to create something new. This often led to a greater appreciation of food and cooking, as people took the time to learn and understand different cooking techniques and ingredients. There was also a greater sense of community, as people would share recipes and cooking tips with each other and come together for communal meals. News was completely different before the internet. People relied on nightly news, newspapers, and magazines for their daily news, as there was no 24-hour news cycle or instant access to news updates. People would have to walk to a newsstand or subscribe to a newspaper that could be delivered to their door. We would often have to wait until the next day to read the latest news, as there were no breaking news alerts or real-time updates. The news was also generally limited to a specific region or country, as international news was often reported days after the event. Remember when people relied on film cameras and Polaroid cameras to capture memories? Digital cameras were not widely available until the late 1990s, so this meant physically going to a store to buy film and then having the pictures developed, often waiting days or even weeks to see the final results. You also had to be careful with the number of pictures you took, as film was limited and you couldn't just delete a picture if you didn't like it. The pictures were physical prints, and people would store them in photo albums or scrapbooks to preserve the memories. The ways in which we communicate clearly have been drastically altered. Handwriting letters or speaking to someone face-to-face has been replaced by texting. Physically writing the words or using a manual typewriter meant then using correction fluid to correct any mistakes. This created a greater sense of craftsmanship, and it was a time when people took pride in their penmanship or the speed that they could type out a letter with few mistakes. Despite the limitations, life before the internet was full of fun and adventure. People made the most of what they had, and they cherished their personal connections, especially face-to-face interactions. Knowing your neighbors and actually answering the door when someone knocked was the way things were done back then. I hope this journey back reminded you of the simple things in life and how technology has altered our lives completely. Let me know in the comments if I missed anything, and maybe even consider supporting the channel over on Patreon. If you enjoyed this video, consider watching this playlist, then visit the channel to search the Recollection Road Library. As always, thank you so much for watching.